England is a country stitched together by memory. Ancient stone walls and hedgerows, winding lanes that follow the same paths, trodden for centuries. The light falls gently here, filtering through centuries-old trees and across fields that hold stories no one remembers speaking aloud. There is a kind of sacred quiet to this place. You feel it in the mist that settles over the hills at dawn, in the hush of a chapel where the air itself seems to pray, in the way time slows down among the moss and the graves. I came here not just to look, but to see, to walk the roads our ancestors walked, to feel what they felt, and to listen for the voices that still echo in the places they once called home. One of those voices belongs to Sarah Goode. Her life was not carved into monuments or written into books, but it is rooted in these hills, these parishes, these stone thresholds worn smooth by everyday living. She was a mother, a wife, a believer, and a survivor. And her story, though quiet, is not small. It rises from this soil, just as surely as the morning light, across the English countryside.
I came to England searching for shadows, footprints worn into stone, whispers carried on the wind,
places we had only seen in records, names inked into the fragile pages of family memory. This journey is not just through landscape, but through time, retracing the quiet life of Sarah Goode Marshall, our great-grandmother, and the world she knew. Nearly all of her life unfolded within a 5-mile radius of the quiet village of Linton. From the chapel where her children were christened to the meadows that framed her childhood, every path she walked, every stone wall she passed, is still here, waiting to be seen, to be felt, to be understood. This is the story of a woman rooted in the English soil, whose life, so often overlooked, unfolds not in grand cathedrals or sweeping estates, but in kitchens, chapels, and country lanes. This is where it all began. Sarah Goode was born on March 2nd, 1821, in the market village of Micheldean, nestled in the ancient forest of Dean. It's a quiet, rugged place, surrounded by wooded hills and scattered stone cottages where her family had lived for generations. Her father, William Goode, and her grandfather before him were both born here. This was not just Sarah's beginning. It was the heart of her family's long roots in this corner of Gloucestershire. A year later, on April 1st, 1822, Sarah was christened in the nearby parish of Abode, just a mile or so down the road. The church still stands today, small, worn, and beautiful in its simplicity, holding centuries of whispered prayers and promises within its ancient stone walls. The baptismal font where Sarah was christened still rests in the quiet of that sanctuary, smooth and time-worn. As we look upon it now, we see the very place where her name was spoken for the first time in sacred rite, an ordinary act made extraordinary by time. In England, villages like these are not spread far and wide. Abode, Micheldean, and later Linton, where Sarah would spend most of her life, exist within just a few miles of each other. For someone unfamiliar with the UK, it helps to understand. Towns are tucked closely together, separated by little more than winding country lanes and patchwork fields. To the modern eye, not much has changed. The roads are now paved, but they still follow the same narrow curves they did in Sarah's day. Tall hedgerows rise along the lanes. And the farmhouses and parish churches remain standing, almost untouched by time. As Sarah and Thomas built their family, their children were born and christened across the neighboring parishes that ring the hills of Linton. Tryphena, Louisa, and George were baptized in Aston Ingham, a village just east of home. Lavinia was born and christened in Leah, further north, on a green hillside. Selina followed, born and christened in Linton itself. And finally, little Sarah, the youngest, was born on Linton Hill. But unlike her siblings, she was never christened in the Church of England. Her baptism would come later, in a different church, under a different faith, signaling a new chapter that had not yet begun. Each place tells a story. Each name on a record, each stone in a churchyard, marks a life once lived in these still green hills. Through these towns and parishes, we begin to trace the quiet contours of Sarah's early life. A life shaped not by grandeur, but by place, by people, and by an enduring connection to the land. In the rolling green folds above the village of Linton lies a narrow lane called Linton Hill. It was here, in the 1850s, that Sarah Goode Marshall lived with her husband Thomas and their growing family. The house still stands, nestled into the hillside, as it was nearly 2 centuries ago. Time has softened its stone, but the shape of the life lived here remains. The present owner, E. in Houston, has occupied the house for 30 years. It remains on its original footings and basic wall structures, despite the numerous modifications made by him and other previous owners. Remarkably, he and his wife know the story of Sarah Marshall. They welcomed us in and allowed us to film where she once worked, rested, and raised her children. Within these walls, everyday life unfolded, wash hung to dry, bread baked, children called in from the fields. It is one thing to read about a place in a journal. It is another to stand inside it. From hearth to pew, we follow her steps up the hill and into the heart of the village. The most significant moment in Sarah's spiritual journey came inside the ancient chapel of St. Mary's Church in Linton. This is where she sat, week after week, listening to the sermons of the local vicar. And it was here that she penned a line in her journal that would change the course of generations.
I believe that there's more to the Bible than what I'm hearing.
You sit here in your quiet, in your mind's eye. You can see them.
That quiet doubt, gentle, inquisitive, brave, became the seed of a future none of them could have imagined. It opened her heart to the message of the Mormon missionaries who would soon arrive, and ultimately it set in motion the westward migration that brought thousands of her descendants into a new faith and a new life. Inside this chapel, the pews are worn, the pulpit unchanged. I sat where she sat. I looked at what she looked at. That moment, a private revelation in a public space, binds us to her, not just by blood, but by belief. Outside in the churchyard stands something even older. A yew tree, broad, dark, and patient, has shaded this land for nearly 2,000 years. It stood here when Sarah passed beneath it. It sheltered her children. Its branches still rise over this place, timeless and rooted, like the legacy she left behind. Daily life for Sarah Goode Marshall was shaped by the rhythms of rural Gloucestershire, slow, physical, and unrelenting. Her days were filled with work, tending to children, managing the home, and carrying the quiet burdens of motherhood in a time that left little room for rest. Though her roots ran deep in Linton, Sarah may have occasionally traveled further, perhaps even to Gadfield Elm Chapel, near Ledbury. Now recognized as the oldest existing LDS chapel in the world, it was a humble stone building that once welcomed apostles and early missionaries. Though 12 miles distant from Linton, it's possible Sarah made the journey to hear them preach, her spiritual hunger leading her across hedgerows and hillsides. The chapel has since been lovingly restored, and we step inside its walls to feel what she might have felt, hope in its earliest form. Back in Linton, life grew harder. Her husband Thomas was a troubled man, plagued by alcohol, infidelity, and a violent temper that flared when Sarah followed the call of her new faith. Tensions in the home deepened as her convictions grew stronger. Then came the moment that would forever alter the course of her life. Thomas had taken a position as a sheep herder at Court Farm, about 2 miles from their home on Linton Hill. Unknown to Sarah, he had been hoarding money, planning to run away with another woman. When someone brought word to her, she set off across the fields, determined and likely afraid to confront him. The land she crossed is still open today, unchanged in its shape and silence. What happened at Court Farm is recorded in family history with clarity and pain. Sarah found Thomas drunk and volatile. When she refused his demands to drink a toxic substance, white mercury used to treat sheep, he turned the bottle on himself. She knocked it away. But not in time. The damage had been done. Thomas Marshall died 5 days later in agony. It was a cruel, tragic moment. And yet, it cracked open the future. With her husband gone, Sarah could finally begin to shape her life on her own terms. The strength she had shown in surviving now turned to strength in building. She would find a way to support her 6 children and begin the long, uncertain journey toward a new world. Sarah gathered what strength she had and moved her family from Linton to the city of Hereford. Hereford is a city of quiet grandeur, its cobbled streets lined with timbered buildings, and at its heart, the great cathedral that has stood for over 1,000 years. The cathedral still casts its long shadow over the city square. Its bells still ring across the rooftops. Sarah would have heard them too. Sarah's world expanded here. The bustling markets, the tradespeople, the river that curves through the city, all of it would have felt overwhelming and full of possibility. Here, she worked, she saved, she made choices not just for survival, but for something greater, for faith, for future, with a goal to go to Zion. And though her time in Hereford was short, it marked the final chapter of her life in England, a place she had always known and would never return to. Sarah Goode Marshall lived her entire life within a handful of miles, and yet her influence now spans continents and generations. She never sought greatness. She simply endured. She believed. She chose. She left no mansion, no title, no wealth, but she left us this, a legacy of faith and fierce determination. A reminder that strength often speaks in whispers, That history is built not only by kings and battles, but by women like Sarah, whose lives were rooted in stone and sacrifice, and whose names live on because we choose to remember them.